We're talking Saquon Barkley, New York Giants, a fantasy-focused episode of the Get Paid podcast. You're listening this time to David G from Guru Fantasy World and Sean, as usual. David, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, before we get rolling on Saquon Barkley, I want to remind everybody, 2020 Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide is out. It's on Amazon. Check the link below. It'll take you right to it. Long story short, over 300 players ranked. We rank more players. There's more sleeper-focused mathematics, more, I guess, fantasy football sports analytics than you're going to find anywhere else. We really go into the math and the science of this stuff, but we also make it enjoyable enough for just anybody else to come read. So we're talking... I like to bring David on to talk about the fantasy stuff because Brad on the show is everybody knows who listens to this podcast as usual. Brad's more gambling focused, so we wanted to get more people fantasy focused on rather than me just kind of rambling through stuff. So today I want to talk to you, David, about Saquon Barkley as we're doing these kind of micro episodes here and these player vignettes, if you will. And Saquon Barkley, I've seen him in draft rankings start to creep ahead of Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't say that's the most popular option. I still think, as we talked about the last time we did one of these shows, I think Christian McCaffrey is still kind of the consensus number one, but the vote is closer this year than it has been, at least it was last year. So Saquon Barkley, I see him creeping ahead, and although I like Saquon Barkley, and I'll be honest with you, I can't remember where I have him ranked. I think I have him ranked number 2 in here. I could just flip open my 250-page fantasy football beautiful thing. Doesn't it look good, David? Doesn't it look good?
It does.
Little
It
cover here.
does.
But I think I have Saquon Barkley ranked number 2. And I want to kick this over to you, but here's the thought. As with Christian McCaffrey, and we talked the new coaching staff coming in, you made the great cases like, look, we're going to get some regression because Christian McCaffrey's season last year was insane, so we're going to see some regression. Well, Saquon Barkley, and I know you have stats up, I have some stats up too. Keep in mind that he has a new coaching staff coming in as well. You have Judge coming over, the special teams guy from New England, well revered, I guess, in NFL circles, but he's kind of an unknown entity in terms of coaching philosophy. He brings in Miami Dolphins ex-coordinator, defensive coordinator to run the defense. And he also brings in Jason Garrett, recently fired from the Dallas Cowboys, to run the offense. My inclination is that, of course, these guys are going to have it's going to be the Patriot way, so I believe that they're going to have full reign to run the offense and the defense how they want to. So this, to me, lends itself to Jason Garrett. What is he going to do with this team? You have a young quarterback there. Is he going to do what he did early in Romo's career and just try to pass, or is he going to do what he did with DeMarco Murray and Ezekiel Elliott and run? What are your inclinations? What do you think is going to happen with Jason Garrett and the usage of Saquon Barkley this year?
I think Barkley, we can probably call him pretty much scheme-proof. I think he's going to basically put up numbers regardless of what scheme he's in. I think what it comes down to is whether those numbers come more in the running game or if his receiving game is boosted closer to, say, 100 receptions, kind of like McCaffrey's been hitting recently.
Yeah. And please go ahead.
I think to me it's less about the scheme and it's more about the surrounding parts.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 solid wide receivers. Ingram's there. So I think we're going to see a lot of receptions, but I still think it's probably going to land more around the 80 reception range than closer to the 100.
Yep. And I'm looking through right now. One of the things my guide does is it shows you kind of the depth chart, fantasy depth chart, and it shows you kind of the key additions and losses too. Because obviously in fantasy football, if you're focusing on running back or you could even say something like Emmanuel Sanders going to New Orleans. How's that going to impact Michael Thomas, which we'll talk about on a future episode coming up. But, you look at that. You mentioned the rest of the team around him. You have Ingram. I like Slayton quite a bit, but they have talented receivers. And Sterling Shepard, who really hasn't ever broken out from a fantasy point of view, but he's serviceable. You got Golden Tate still there. And I'm looking at the additions and subtractions of the offseason. There's always going to be some upheaval with the coaching staff change. But in the draft, you add an offensive tackle in the first round. They need some offensive line help. You get it. Dion Lewis is added in free agency, which I don't think that impacts Saquon so much. But I think they needed an upgrade from like Wayne Gallman and some of these other guys. So you have Saquon Barkley and Dion Lewis, 2 similar type running backs. So if Saquon goes down with an injury like he did for a few games last year, You're okay. But no, the additions in the free agency, you get another offensive tackle, some depth. So I think that they're improving as an organization, obviously. But what I'm looking at Saquon is last year, he still got over 1,000 yards rushing on 217 attempts, 300 less than the previous year, but also 3 less games. 73 targets and 52 receptions. That's what concerns me, and I think that's kind of what you're getting to here. Remember Saquon's rookie year, and a lot of people forget this, but Saquon's rookie year, like, the Giants had injuries all over receiver. They only had, like, one weapon, and it was Saquon Barkley, so he had 91 receptions. You look at 2019, I think that's going to be more indicative of what we're going to see. He had 52 receptions. Even if you average that out, he might have had like 66. He still probably was going to decrease by about 1/3 in terms of receptions, receiving yards. Touchdowns is going to be kind of up and down. So Saquon, I personally don't see him as a challenge to Christian McCaffrey. But why do you think people are putting Saquon above and then maybe, taking that risk to put him above Christian McCaffrey? Do you have any idea why that would be?
I will get to that, but first
Sure.
I want to add something else too that kind of adds to what you were talking about. That first year, our idea of Saquon's baseline reception total might have been distorted a little bit because
Right.
Eli Manning was also the quarterback. Late career, anybody who watched Eli Manning, he was a dump off machine.
Right.
Refused to throw it down the field to Odell Beckham. Refused to do anything other than to just look to the sideline, dump the ball off, get it out of his hands. So that also greatly inflated Barkley's reception total. Daniel Jones, we saw last year, a little more likely to heave the ball down the field, take shots to Slayton, gets Ingram back healthy this year. I think we're going to see less just scared dump-offs where it's just get the ball out of the hands. So I think that's one thing that you bring up a good point. Barkley's reception total is probably going to be closer to that last year than the year before. As far as why people would be taking him before McCaffrey, I think it just comes down to the physical freak athlete part of it. Because if we're talking about freak athletes, McCaffrey's one of them. But in the entire NFL, Barkley might be the freakiest athlete of them all. So it just comes down to he's got more physical power than McCaffrey has. He can just do more as an athlete than McCaffrey can do. He's just as good as a threat in the receiving game, but he just kind of brings that power element that McCaffrey doesn't really have.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a little bit diluted fantasy wise, but again, we were talking about this in the Christian McCaffrey episode as well. The usage with the new coaching staff coming, and I don't think this is going to be the same thing. I do think Garrett, he had that pass happy reputation when he had Romo at quarterback. But when you have Romo at quarterback, as good as Tony Romo was playing, and you have like DeMarco Murray, or I think there was like I can't even remember the guy's first name, but there was Barber. He was out of Minnesota.
Oh, Marion the Barbarian.
Oh, was it Marion? It went through my head. I thought that was I had that off.
That might have been before Romo. I don't know the timeline that well.
I think they might have crossed a season or two, but I know they had DeMarco Murray. I know they had kind of a poo-poo platter there for a little bit a while, and then Ezekiel Elliott come in right when Tony Romo started to get hurt, and they started going more towards the run. But if you look at Garrett's kind of early coaching career, outside of having Tony Romo at quarterback, and look, I like Daniel Jones, don't get me wrong, but he's not where Tony Romo was when kind of Garrett took him over. He's going to run, and I'm curious to see, but he's not going to run in the same style that Ezekiel Elliott is, because they're different frames, and you got to protect your asset, your freak athlete, like you were saying before. So I don't think it's going to be a decrease in usage. I think it's going to be a situation where they're on the goal line. Like, let's say it's first and goal from the 1. What are they going to do? What are your options here? Do you want to slam Saquon Barkley's head against the offensive line, 2 or 3 downs, like maybe you would have with Ezekiel Elliott? I don't know if that's what you want to do with the personnel grouping. Or do you want to try to isolate Ingram or Slayton or Shepard? I think we're going to get a lot more passing in the red zone inside the 5-yard line than maybe the Dallas Cowboys of recent years would have done. And that's going to kind of limit his value. But then, like we were saying a week or so back when we talked Christian McCaffrey, is what do you really do, right? At that point, because I don't think that these guys are far and away. I don't think the gap is as much as it was, like we were saying. But what do you do? Do you pick like a guy like Dalvin Cook over one of these guys? Dalvin Cook often injured. I don't know. And we'll talk about him in a coming up episode. Nick Chubb, who I like more than the rest of the fantasy group, well, he's got Kareem Hunt, right? So that's a risk. I don't see like a slam dunk risk-free player that you would pick either like over either one of these guys. And I was people on YouTube might have seen me kind of flipping through my book to run through because I wanted to see where he was, because I was like, maybe do I even go back and edit my book and put him below? And I just don't think you can do it. But what do you think? I mean, would you have any candidate to be drafted above either? Well, I know we agreed on Christian McCaffrey being one, but would you pick anybody above Saquon Barkley at number 2?
I think Barkley, the consensus pretty much he is the number 2, but I'd much rather entertain a debate for putting him above McCaffrey than I would for putting someone else above Barkley for number 3.
Yeah.
If I was going to do it, first 2 that come to my mind would be Zeke and Kamara. But Zeke, we have Dallas added, CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard played very well last year. He's going to steal receiving work.
Mike McCarthy offense.
It puts a cap on Zeke's 3-down potential, so I don't really see any sort of conversation that you can make a case for Zeke over Saquon.
Right.
Kamara, he's got more of that 3-down potential. We haven't seen him really handle that elite rushing volume, though, and he's also coming off an injury, so I don't really want to entertain that either. If anyone, it's that guy you said, Dalvin Cook. Only 2 players had more points per game than Saquon Barkley. I'm throwing out Barkley's week 3 where he got hurt. But if you throw out that game, only McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook averaged more points per game last year.
Right.
And you can also look at it as the positive with, if you're going first-round running back, you're choosing between one of the 2. You're not getting both. So if you're choosing between Cook and Barkley, Dion Lewis is a solid handcuff, but if you're very handcuff savvy or very intent on getting that handcuff for your first-round running back, Alexander Mattison offers you a lot more insurance and safety.
Yes.
Is it really worth it? That's the debate, I guess, that to be had. Each person's going to have to decide, because with me, Dalvin Cook, too many injuries. I'm not doing it. But if I'm entertaining a debate, it's Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that note with Alexander Mattison, and you mentioned this in the Christian McCaffrey episode, which if you haven't listened or watched, I definitely encourage everybody to kind of go back and listen to that. But that's a great argument, right? If you're looking for safety, who's the backup, right? It's Bonifon for at this point for Christian McCaffrey. Was it Dion Lewis for New York, right? So if you pick one of those guys early in your draft and Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley go down, you can't really handcuff those guys to a backup there. It's your roster is decreasing. But in Minnesota, if you get Dalvin Cook and you handcuff him with an Alexander Mattison, or I guess you can make kind of like, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a weaker argument, but you can make that case with New Orleans as well, with Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara, right? The backups there, or Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. The backups there could give you a roster that uplift. And if you lose that guy for, God forbid, like with an ACL tear, you have a plug-and-play backup there who's going to be able to get you points. So that is a very interesting argument. Yeah, I agree.
I just want to cut in real quick, too, because this kind of leads into something which, funny to say, my favorite thing about Saquon Barkley last year was the fact that he got hurt. And I'm obviously being a little facetious when I say that. But if we look back, he got hurt, right? It was the ankle. When it first happened, we didn't know how long he was going to be out. They were talking maybe IR, maybe surgery. Eventually, they settled on a 4 to 8 week time frame. He was back in 3 weeks.
I know, right? So
that kind of gets back to that freak athlete element with Saquon Barkley. We know if he suffers some sort of a high ankle sprain is not exactly a minor injury.
Sure,
if he suffers some sort of injury, he's going to fight through it. He's going to get back. He's going to play even in what was a lost season. His last 3 games of the year, 32, 45, 20 fantasy points. So he's going to play when it doesn't matter. He's going to play when he's hurt, and he's going to get back from injuries in a really quick time frame. So I think that's definitely a selling point for Saquon, especially if you're considering the handcuffs. Do you really even need a handcuff with a guy like that?
Yeah, right. Okay, I think we can tie that episode up there. Once again, everybody, reminder, Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide available on Amazon.com. Click the link below. We will be back with another episode, another player vignette soon. I think the next one we are going to do is Michael Thomas. And, I know we're going to be talking. I can't wait to get to Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook. There's a lot of players to talk about, so I'm looking forward to all that. So definitely check us out on another episode soon. Thank you to David. Once again, you want to plug your Twitter? You want to plug your website real quick before we go?
Yeah, if you guys want to check us out, you can go to gurufantasyworld.blogspot.com, or you can check me out on Twitter at gurufantasy, WRLD.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Hey, go out, make some bets, and get paid.